Hello students. I would like to say a few words to supplement the reading for this week on the topic of fallacies. I hope that what I say today can help connect this topic to what we've covered so far in the past, bringing prior concepts with us today, and also extending those prior concepts so we can think of them in new ways and apply them in new ways. In the most basic sense, fallacy is speech that leads away from the truth. By now I think we can say that philosophy itself is striving towards the truth. In fact, philosophy means love of wisdom, love or inclination. So the philosopher will always be attempting to move closer to the truth. Then we can see that a fallacy, when it leads away from the truth, is antithetical to philosophy in a very fundamental sense. Another distinction that we've made earlier in this course is the distinction of different kinds of knowledge. We've talked about knowledge as information, or knowledge as propositions, propositional knowledge. We've talked about knowledge as facts. This is one category of knowledge. This is the kind that Google supplies for us. A second kind of knowledge is different than the first kind. It's knowledge as understanding. It's not contrary to the first kind of knowledge, because it's really, in fact, it depends on the first kind of knowledge. Knowledge as understanding, it has something to do with recognizing the meaning of those facts, or that information, or those propositions. So knowledge as understanding is a kind of deepening of the first kind of knowledge. It's very analogous to reading a text. In the first kind of knowledge, by analogy, we could imagine a whole strings of letters. One kind of knowledge would be the informational content and to know which letters were in that string. This obviously is not the same kind of knowledge as recognizing if those letters spelled something. In other words, recognizing it as a text. I use this as an analogy to illuminate the difference between these two kinds of knowledge. The first, propositional knowledge, and the second, knowledge as understanding. This differentiation parallels the differentiation that we made on the very first day of class in our discussion. This was the differentiation between critical thinking and naive thinking. In naive thinking, we simply take things as a matter of course, as they present themselves to us immediately. Critical thinking means that we attempt to understand and attempt to inquire more deeply into what is presenting itself to us on the surface. As I mentioned, we applied the same spirit of critical thinking to the notion of critical thinking itself on the first day of class. This was to ensure that we're not conducting the class in a spirit that was antithetical to what the ostensible subject of the class was supposed to be, namely critical thinking. If we hadn't applied critical thinking to the notion of critical thinking itself, we might have gone through the whole course in a naive way. Again, this would be contrary to the very spirit of what we're trying to study. Now we can see that critical thinking and that philosophical thinking, we can see that this is a kind of thinking that is oriented towards understanding. It's seeking the truth of what presents itself to us immediately. It's seeking to understand what presents itself to us immediately. A fallacy would be something that presents itself to us immediately, often in terms of speech, but it's speech that's unlike dialogues and conversations, such as the discussions that we were conducting in class and we're attempting to conduct on the online forum, despite certain challenges and difficulties that are more or less unavoidable given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. these conversations, these dialogues, we were always oriented towards the truth. And so we took even disagreements between us, we used them as a way to approach a given topic from different sides. And the parable of the blind man and the elephant was a very useful visualization of this process that we're trying to undertake in authentic dialogue. If we think of a fallacy is the opposite of that kind of dialogue. It's speech that leads away from the truth and not towards the truth. Now, in a forum like this, in a lecture when I'm speaking to the video, it's not conducive of listing the different categories of fallacy and genuses and subgenuses. Your textbook lists them out in a very clear way, and so I'll leave you to do that on your own. I mostly, with this video, was hoping to introduce the topic of fallacies in a context that is continuous with what we have studied up until this point, with what we have discussed up until this point. I hope that what I said can help illuminate the content of your chapter in this way. And with that, I will close the video and wish everybody the very best.